Named ranges in Excel. Named ranges is one of those things that if you know it, it'll save you a whole bunch of time in Excel. A named range is when we have a bunch of cells and we give them a name. And simply Excel knows that whenever we type that name, it refers to that bunch of cells. For example, we could have something like this group that I've selected here, and we could give it a named range so that instead of J2 to K11, it's called a code matrix, or it's called data matrix 1, or whatever we want to name it. So in our formulas, instead of referring to the range J2 to K11, we would refer to the range data matrix. It's a whole lot easier to remember a data matrix than to remember a range of cells. And also, if at some point I change this range, I add additional lines or whatever, I can simply update the name definition and all my formulas will automatically be up to date. I don't have to go formula by formula updating the range. Now, named ranges are useful because they keep us from having to write references over and over again. Like I said, if you have 20 formulas that you need to write out and all of the formulas refer to the same cell range, you might as well use a named range and simply write the name instead of having to write the range every time. These ranges are especially useful if you're working with pivot tables or the SUMIF function or the lookups function. For example, VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP. Those are functions that usually require a matrix type data entry, which is normally something like this, a table or a database or something like that. And you have a large amount of data. So it's always better with these functions to use named ranges in Excel. In fact, if you're using lookup functions or pivot tables or something like that, named ranges are ideal because, as I said, if you add additional lines or if additional lines show up, for example, if you're taking your information from a database externally and the database is updated and all of a sudden you get a whole bunch more data, just update the name and you know that all your tables are going to be up to date as long as they're using the named range. Okay, how do we define a named range in Excel? Well, the easiest way is to select a cell or a group of cells and edit the name right here. See here where it says name box? If you edit this name here, Excel will automatically assign that name to the range you've selected. For example, let's say that I want this cell J4, which has a value of C199, to be called my cell 1. And that's going to be the name for that cell range. Now watch what happens right here if I'm going to do a formula and I type equals my cell 1. Look at what Excel did here. It knows that there's a name for a range that starts with my, and it automatically suggests my cell 1. So I can type equals my cell 1 and I get the value of C199, which is the value that corresponds to this named range. Now, if I want to edit a name or delete a name, I have to go to the Formulas menu. And in the Formulas menu, there's this button which says Name Manager. I step into the Name Manager, and here's my cell definition. And down here, where it says Refers to, I can edit what that range refers to. Currently, it's J4, but let's say I want J6, which would be this one, T312. And I press the little check mark here to save the definition, close it, and automatically my range updated to T312. See why this is so useful? Because if I have 20 formulas that reference this particular range, my cell 1, I can change the range whichever way I want, and I can change it once here in the Name Manager, and every single formula is going to update automatically. That's why this is so useful. Let's try another example. If you remember a couple of chapters ago where we used sum product, let's say that we wanted the sum product of these two columns of cases and point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a first range, which is called cases column. I usually like these underscore characters because they let you write out longer names, and longer names can be better at describing the data that you're using. And points column, like that. And what I do if I want my sum product is equals sum product, but instead of selecting this range, I'm going to type cases column right here. Cases column is the first one. See how that's automatically selected in blue? And the second one is points column, which I'm going to select here. See how that's selected in red? And I could keep on adding ranges and ranges, but for now I have those two. And the result is 2181. Let's check to see if that's correct. It probably is, but just for the sake of argument, let's do a sum product of this one and this one, like that. See, 2181 versus 2181. Now for pivot tables, as I said, this is also very useful because I can define a range, which is called pivot data, for example, or you could name it data matrix or whatever. And we're going to look into pivot tables a little later on in this tutorial, so don't worry if you don't completely understand what I'm doing here. Just pay attention to the fact that I'm going to use a named range. And see, right here where it says select table or range, I'm going to select this one called pivot data, like that. And there's my pivot table, and sure enough, it's pulling the data from the range that I have here. If I type select change sort data, see, this is automatically selected like that. Okay, pay attention here. My selected range is this one, and it's going down to row 7. Now watch what happens if I update the name, and instead of having pivot data go to row 7, I tell it to go to row 11. I just changed one definition, and watch what happens inside the pivot table. Right here, pivot, analyze, change source data, and automatically my range updated all the way to row 11. So that's what I was telling you about. If I have 2, 3, 4, 5 pivot tables in my Excel spreadsheet, I can update the name only once and have them all automatically update to include all the data. That's the power of named ranges in Excel, and that's why they're so useful. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and to visit our website, cubicleoverlords.com, for more instructional videos like this one.